Hey everybody, welcome back to the show. Shawn Tierney here from Insights in Automation, and we have another exciting episode of the History of Automation podcast coming to you from all over the world. Two of us are in the Northeast, one's on the West Coast, but I want to start by welcoming back my co-host, Gary. Gary, how is the weather out there?
It's always really good, pretty darn good. So no complaints at all. I strategically am not going to show you the pool because then you're going to get the stereotype that everybody who lives in Southern California has a full length pool. It's not the case. Okay, that's just the stereotype. So don't judge me. But I'll get the camera fixed. But life is good out here. It's actually Huntington Beach, California, which is about 15, 20 miles from where Triconics was founded and Wonderware was founded. So that was the place called Irvine, California. So it's a pretty good part of the world to live in, but we try to keep it quiet.
Yeah, I know the snow's going to be flying out here before we know it. I just spent 2 hours here in the Berkshires out in Western Mass mowing my 3 acres of lawn, which I'm getting. My brothers have been telling me you need to plant trees, man. And I'm like, yeah, we're going to plant trees, get rid of that. Get rid of that. It looks like a golf course. It's horrible. But anyways, we're very thankful. Now, Jeremy couldn't be here. Everybody, he just want to let you know he wanted to be here, but he is on vacation with his bride. So of many years. I don't want to make it sound like he just got married. But in any case, I did want to thank Steve. And Stephen, thank you for responding to the call to come on and tell us about, share your knowledge about the history of automation. But before we jump into that, maybe tell the audience a little bit about yourself. We already did this, Gary and I, in a previous episode. So if you don't mind telling the audience a little bit about yourself, kind of a little bit about your journey, and then we'll go back and talk about, your first lab tech notebook and your first time using LabVIEW and things like that. But before we do that, introduce yourself to our audience, please.
Hello. Yes, hi. Currently, I'm sitting in my basement in Vermont. I get to come up here on weekends or whenever I can when I'm not traveling and visiting clients. We're in the office in my company with my partners in Tewksbury, Massachusetts. We have a company, SPEC Process Engineering Construction. We design, build chemical, battery, recycling, all sorts of different kinds of factories. Automation, architecture, concrete, HVAC, fire protection, the whole gamut needed to expand facilities. So that's where I am now. And I started as a child of the 70s, watching the moon landing, and every once in a while getting a glimpse of a computer, and finally getting the opportunity to put my fingers on a keyboard in 5th grade and wrote my first basic program on a teletype. Yeah, teletype connected up to a PDP, PDP-8, PDP-10. I don't remember what it was. Some kind of regional deck machine.
That's awesome. That's a little before my time. In 5th grade, we were using the Apple II. I think it was Apple IIe. So a little bit ahead of my time. Now, when you first got out of school, right? And you were telling me about your first IBM PC, the notebook or a laptop. What was that like?
Oh, no, it was not a laptop. It was,
A Lugable?
at that time, 1984. It was when the original Charlie Chaplin IBM PC came out. And I said, this is what I need. And he said, I remember the boss who was my professor. He was my professor at university.
Okay.
He pulled me out of the school and when he said, I got a startup. When you graduate, why don't you come work for me instead of Kodak or IBM or one of those big guys? Just come over to my place. And he said, well, now you're starting to need a computer, don't you? That's what I hear you need nowadays. And I said, yeah. So I said, this is what I need. Got the CGA and 2 disk drives. I learned how to do calculations with Lotus 123.
Lotus 123. Yep. OG spreadsheet. And Gary, I don't know if we ever talked about your first computer. What was your first computer?
Wait 1 second here.
Sure.
Oh, so Shawn, no, that was my first computer that in my work. Before then, I had I scrounged up, I don't know, $50 and bought the Sinclair ZX80, the little Sinclair.
ZX80, yes.
Since you can't see this, this is the book I was talking about, and Steve's more in that era as I was. You can't see it's blurred.
No, I can't see
It's
it.
called "The Soul of a New Machine" by Tracy Kidder, and I think I bought actually my copy when I was driving in Maine. But you may have heard of it, Steve, and that was just fire to me. You know, it was just so fascinating. It was kind of the first kind of nonfiction about what we did, and it just took off. So I still have that on my bookshelf, of course. My background, Shawn,
As far as
on first computer, yeah. So I really had a career in the military industrial complex, and we started getting technology. I spent a lot of that time overseas. So very, very lucky. I think we bought. Oh well, I go back to the teletype days myself in the military, but I went to school in San Francisco area in 80, 81 and caught the Steve Jobs fire thing, you know, and that whatever that guy's doing, I'd like to do something like that. I probably saw an Apple II by the mid 80s. Anybody remember something called the Wang?
yes.
I lived in the Boston area.
So-
Had a Wang business system in my.
Oh my goodness, it was such an error. So when I got into aerospace and started wearing coat and tie, and it was McDonnell Douglas or Boeing at the time, Wangs were everywhere, right? It seemed like he had 100% of the market. Later on, then we got Apples, and that was great. That was really great. But one day someone said, too expensive. Switched to, IBM or clones, and ever since. And then laptops came in the mid 90s. And so in a 20-year career, in aerospace, where I was able to get into training and technology, and I didn't start at Triconics till actually 95. And that was an amazing, amazing run. And by then I was kind of ready as an educator and technologist to join this startup company, which still had the startup atmosphere, and just took off from there. I know everything about the industry, from, paper plants to nuclear power plants. It was just so interesting. I personally thought what they did was pretty important. I thought what we made was pretty important. So they had me at hello. And training was really my, basically the job that I did best.
Steve, that ZX, my brother actually, his first computer was a ZX81, and or Timex Sinclair was reselling them, but that was like that was the OG, right? Home computer, affordable home computer.
But I wasn't really able to get real value out of systems until I started to use basically Quick Basic to connect up to a variety of serial devices.
Now, Quick Basic, was that who is that? Was that Microsoft or somebody else?
Borland.
Quick Basic. All
right. But of course, at that point, they may have just been a publisher and bought it, just like Bill Gates did with his different operating systems and programs too. So I don't really know. But we were able to get basically licensed libraries for different kinds of communication for all sorts of lab equipment.
Oh, nice.
So I worked as basically the first engineer in a startup biotechnology company in the Boston area. So I supported all the chemists and biochemists with lab automation systems, which we just started to build ourselves with our own databases and whatever we could find, because there wasn't much there at the time.
Now, Quick Basic, tell me if I'm right. Unlike regular Basic, which we would have had on a ZX80, 81, or I had a Commodore VIC-20. That's what I started out with, TI-99 4A,
Yep.
Apple IIe. That was Basic. It was all, you're typing. But Quick Basic, was that like a Visual Basic in any way?
No, there were some add-on semi-graphical systems you could do.
Okay.
But it was kind of pixelated graphics. But it was for data. So it didn't make any difference. You were controlling laboratory robots to aliquot chemicals and do zero dilutions in
Okay.
microtiter plates. And then connecting up to the analytical equipment, the radiation detectors and spectrophotometers on the back end to analyze all the data coming back to look at the concentrations and sensitivities of all the things we were doing.
And how were you communicating? So you had these driver libraries that you had access to in Quick Basic. What was typically, was it 45, 232, 422? How were you communicating to the lab equipment?
That back then it was standard. It was proprietary 232 interfaces.
Okay.
So you had to basically build your own strings depending on the kind of device it was. That was the first one. Eventually, I finally found Opta 22 and Optimux and realized it's a much more extensible protocol. But of course, I couldn't get the whole data set off the spectrophotometer or whatever kind of machine I was talking to in the lab. So there are advantages and disadvantages, just like there are right now when I want to put in a scale. Do I do it Profibus, Ethernet, or 420 milliamp?
Well, talk to us about the early Opto 22, because today's Opto 22, I've had them on my show. I mean, they have some really slick stuff. But if I remember, the early Opto 22, wasn't that more single point IO type systems?
I used it was basically multi-drop analog and digital IO, effectively. Okay. And then on the software side, you can do anything you want. Okay. Quick Basic. I did systems with Intellution, with early touchscreens. Oh, so we made some kind of processing system selling to the pharmaceutical companies for $500,000. So, at that point, we spent $2,200 for a CRT touchscreen on an ARM and connected it up to our 8088 or 286, whatever it was at the time.
Yeah.
And with the boop, 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 looked great.
I love watching old
movies.
Still
multiple control loop. It was just a couple control loops and a little sequence, but it looked kind of funny, kind of good.
I love watching old movies like Jurassic Park where they have all the CRTs. It's like the young kids these days, my grandkids, they have no idea. I mean, that's all we had,
But as soon as I could find Wi-Fi tablets, I would bring them into the plants which we're designing and building. Because, if you're climbing up on a platform at the top of a tank to set up a temperature transmitter or something up there, you want to bring in whatever rugged laptop you can find to look at the signals while you're up there instead of have to call back on the radio.
Oh, yeah. Steve, and your story is fascinating. I just kind of get the feeling that you were not the guy at the bottom of the tank saying, okay, kid, when you get up there, I'll tell you what to do in the remote. Sounds to me like you were the guy.
Well, I've been doing a long time. So I started at the bottom, underneath the tank, climbing around, fixing the valves. But you have to do that. Eventually, you get a team, and and then you sit back, and you start to be the one driving the bus. You're the one with your hands on the keyboard, saying, "This is our checklist. This is our startup plan. We're going to start this pump now. All right, everybody ready? Boom. Let's go. Let's watch the flow. Is the flow good? Let's go to the next step." So I've done plenty of startups. And I've seen a couple of spills in my day too.
Where is that knowledge now? Where is that knowledge now? Are you confident that knowledge exists of people like ourselves who actually put the grounding rod in, did the startups,
I have
ground floor
at this point. So I right now I have staff. I have my team at SPEC, and that's what we do. And I don't rely on subcontractors to do it. We take on a big enough chunk as we can chew without choking. All right. But we've done projects up to 6,000 IO. I have a network in New England of stringers I can bring in who will come in and help with loop checks at some level. And we do the projects. And especially nowadays, code is so easy to write. It's trivial now. especially after having done it enough, at this point, we basically developed our own batch library, a giant subroutine for a chemical batch reactor. They're all the same. They got agitate, they got recirculation, they got heat cool, they got pressure control, they got vent. They got cascaded temperature control, they got direct temperature control. They got a recirculation line with a filter. They transfer out by gain in weight, they transfer out by loss in weight. They're all the same. So basically, we laid upon one giant subroutine, effectively, all these items, and basically for every P&ID on the systems which we build now, we just lay on this code and we say, this is on, this is off, this is on, this is off. And it enables and disables the HMI objects and enables and disables the code. So, sitting, it's different now. But of course, my team has never had to sit in front of a working plant with the PLC 5 and doing online code changes without trying to take something down.
That was my next question. But you're out of town by then.
What?
You'll take phone calls and you'll do support, obviously, for your projects.
So my team usually doesn't call me. They call me when there's a really difficult problem. Yeah. But Sam, it was an intern coming out of Northeastern, and I've worked with him for 5 years. And, we can communicate on the right level. It's rarely a problem.
I want to go back to, because you put in here in kind of the timeline of the history of automation, what you've worked with. You have both Genesis, I'm thinking Iconics, and Intuition, I'm thinking Fix. Can you tell me about your experience with both of those? Now, I've known a lot of people use Fix 32 iFix. Yeah. I don't know a lot of people who use Iconics or Genesis.
Okay, so back.
Tell me about
this
that.
Is back yep. In my first job where I was supporting. It was a biotechnology company run by one of my professors from Tufts University, and we had developed a system where first we use a loop controller, and then we use some switches on a stainless steel panel. Then we needed something with some pretty fast sequencing. I needed to have changing gain for the process, because basically we're heating and cooling blood. We were running a blood and blood plasma or blood simulation, which is basically saline, until we figured out actually how to make the machine work right. Basically had a coil and microwave field, heated up really hot, up to 150, 160 degrees, or depending on what process it was. Blood went around 80 or 90 degrees, and then cool it down really quickly and run it through this tiny little process. So we needed to figure out how are we going to control this. So first I found this device called Azonix, which was basically, it was almost like a hex programming multi-loop controller with a bunch of different types of I/O cards. That worked because we figured, but it was way too complicated to adjust. And then I found the Optomux and Genesis, and the guy who sold it to me, one of the someone in New England, I wish I could remember his name now. We put it together. He came one afternoon. He lugged the compact computer, and we hooked it up with Optomux, and we did a little loop, and we made 2 buttons on the touch screen and made it go, and it was sold. So that's how we built the first machine with this. And then at that time, of course, that was DOS graphics.
Yeah.
And then a friend of mine who came in, Tom Schiller, and Mark Walters, bless his soul, he passed away, introduced me to Windows 3.1, or Windows 3 was Fix 32, and said, you can do the same thing and get that really cool Windows interface.
Uh-huh.
And that's what we went to production with this machine. Where basically we had some, 30, 50 millisecond timers running on the PC with Optomux in the background, running the process.
Now, Shawn, Steve, 3.1 is, are we talking like the 1991 period? Because that was the major release, I think, that made Wonderwear take off, basically.
Yeah, so yeah, I did a Wonderwear so right after that technology, right after that project, yeah. Uh, I left that company and I came to do a project with my new employer, a small company which had three people in New England. And he introduced me to Wonderwear. He said, "We're going to do a Wonderwear project." So we did Wonderwear and Siemens TI 505 because he was the one driving it. He came and introduced me. He taught me the professional method for P&IDs because I was inside biotech as the first engineer. I didn't know that stuff. He worked in the oil industry in California for many years, and he came back to the East Coast, started this integration company, and this is we're going to do process, and we did a project. It was really fun. It was for Colonial Candle of Cape Cod for the candle molding machines. They got these giant platens. They pour the molds, they fill the wax, and they heat the things up. They basically heat them up, and then they cool them down, fill them again, heat them up, and cool them down. And they were dumping all the outlet water, the hot and the cold, into this giant tank in the basement. And then heating it up again and putting it back to the machines. And well, of course, they'd heating and cooling. I said, this is silly. Let's put a thermocouple there and put 2 valves. And then we'll switch the hot and cold water.
Yeah.
We can adjust it based on temperature, and you'll save a bunch of money. It paid for itself in like 6 weeks.
Wow.
Simple.
You happen to remember any of the Wonderwear people or contacts you may have worked with, or salespeople?
Yeah,
that goes way, way back.
That goes back. So I had a really good relationship with the team which sold Intolution for many years. I did some really big Intolution projects with them. Kept bumping up against the limit of the capabilities with automatic import of tags. And once you get into hundreds and thousands, because you can generate the detail you need. You think about a P&ID loop in a DCS system. PID loop, a simple one, you got the tuning, auto manual, maybe 6, maybe 10 parameters max is what you need. You add a little bit of scaling in, scaling out, filtering, maybe you get to 20. You go to a Delta V, you get to 120 parameters on. All right. And other DCS systems, it just gets to be so complicated. So you got to pick your tool and limit your variables and limit your choices, especially if you're doing validation for pharmaceutical, because how do you prove that those variables out and variable option number 72 is really not set?
Awesome. And I think Steve Rubin, not too far off the subject, actually also came from Foxborough. At least I read that in my book. I mean, Foxborough was such a birthplace of so many incredible folks, and some went off and were entrepreneurs. And I believe Steve Rubin was a Foxborough employee. For what it's worth, so Foxborough must have been a pretty famous company in your part of the world, shall we say? I mean, did everybody know who they were?
Oh, everybody knew who it was. Especially,
well, good to hear.
It was also a town. In the Foxborough Stadium, until Sullivan Stadium, until whoever Gillette paid for it again. But everybody knew it's the stadium in Foxborough, anyways. All right, so that's where the football teams played.
Yeah, I'm wondering if this is really asking you to go really far back, but having used Intolution, right?
Yeah,
and then used InTouch, and then going back to Fix 32. Did you, and I know there are people who love InTouch, there are people who love iFix or Fix 32. I'm not trying to pit them against each other, because that you love what you use, right? But do you remember any takeaways from the difference between the two of them?
Oh yeah,
Just in
no.
your mind.
Wonderware had a terrible user interface. Too many click, open the window, close the window. The tag listing was a giant scroll through window versus a table. So it was almost unusable. So very quickly you learn to import and export tags from Excel or CSV or whatever. But as quickly as possible after that, I tried to find software because I was able to make my own decisions on many projects.
Yeah.
Find software where it's object oriented. Our tags are object oriented. They're built as part of the system.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I think, you know, I think it, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Involution had a longer track record. Although Wonderway, I kind of jumped on Windows maybe quicker than the competition. I know as we're trying to hawk the Rockwell stuff as a tech support guy back in the day, we heard about Wonderware all the time because everything Rockwell had was still DOS based, and we're in the early '90s, and everybody's talking about Windows, Windows, Windows,
Yeah.
and it was like, yeah, this Windows thing's going to stay. And of course, I had used Macintoshes. I did a stint at Raytheon. I did use Macintoshes there, and object oriented mouses and graphical interfaces. That was the future. And when I got into this business in '90, and we were using ICOM and 6200, it was kind of like DOS space stuff, F5, who active, right? Yeah, it was kind of like, yeah, this is not the future. A graphical orient, a GUI is what the future is. And but it sounds like with iFix that they really jumped on the Windows bandwagon and brought over a lot of their existing customers. I could be wrong about that, but
Yeah, they had the best capability for instantiation of tags and objects over large projects. I selected them. I did a project. I did the Central Artery project at Boston,
Mhm.
Which had 5 large buildings, 142 fans over multiple kinds of networks. I teamed up with Schneider Electric. We did quantum redundant PLCs with fiber optic networks, but we put InTouch on top of it because it allowed us to build the objects for each band, each VFD, each zone with the modes, the safeties, the interlock displays, and distribute them across multi-applications, across multiple buildings, and multiple networks.
And I'm just curious, not to go too far into the future, but what do you guys use today? Do you have a preferred platform today? I'm just curious because
Oh yeah.
is it
Yep.
is it still? It's not still Involution, right? Because they were bought out. They were owned by
Oh no. So today we use Ignition
Okay.
because it's direct connection to SQL databases on the recipe side on the input, and the data storage way on the output. We have a new project where we need relatively fast data storage, and I'm discussing with our engineers that we need to have a different type of database for the bursts of certain data collection times in the process.
I'll just
and
go ahead, please.
and then on the processor side, I'm really kind of agnostic. So for a system which we can turn down, we can turn off. We use anything which will run CodeSys, whether it's an ABB or almost anything, or even a Linux machine. Doesn't make any difference. Right now, Opto22 has really nice hardware, good warranty, and good support. So it's worth it. Plus, it's an American company, so we use Opto22 when we need a regular CodeSys platform. We use Rockwell when we need, we'll say, higher uptime, and money is less of an issue on the budget. Software is just as good. We have our libraries for batch control written in both.
Yeah, Gary, I don't know if you've looked at Ignition at all. I interviewed them 3 or 4 weeks ago for their community conference, which is actually this coming week. For the viewers, it'll be a couple weeks in the past. But I really get the vibe from the Ignition folks. I've had them on a couple times on my show. I really felt that early evolution, that early InTouch Wonderware kind of community, kind of excitement, kind of development. And I don't know if Gary, have you ever done anything with the Ignition or inductive?
No, so I'm very curious to hear more about Ignition. I mean, are they a competitor to both Wonderware and
It's so
Evolution, or-
so we've been doing we'll say PLC and HMI agnostic, meaning not the same company and sometimes the same company for years. I've been building these since Optomux and Genesis. So I built full DCS systems, and I've done plant packs, which is all Rockwell up and down. But I know the problems and the benefits of the Rockwell system. My company does pay for the licensing as an integrator because we got many clients who have it and we support it. But having done the coding myself, I want the best tools. And once we identify the best tools, until something significantly is much better, I'm not switching. So one of the things you mentioned about Intolution, for many years I used to say, I'm going to use Intolution. People say, why? And I said, this is an early industry and is very fragmented still, but Intolution has the largest installed base.
Oh, all right. Yep.
All right. So they have the best bug support, right? People are going to find them. There's a lot of people using them. So it was no difference than going back. The idea, no one's going to get fired for buying IBM computers, even though they cost a bit more money.
Yeah.
All right. That's the way, well, at least that's the way it was in the environment in Massachusetts and New England, in the automation industry back then.
Yeah. Just like nobody would get fired for buying Triconics because they had such a great reputation in the industry.
Yeah.
Which is, go ahead, Gary. I'm sorry.
Yeah, we feel that way. Actually, we Triconics felt that way with a lot of luck and a lot of timing, right? With luck plus timing, that's a good start. But it's simply it was built. A lot of money was spent to meet these standards, these safety standards, and after a while, nobody else was going to spend the money to meet those standards. So, Exxon, anything kind of safety critical project. That's where Triconics rose to the top because they spent the money getting validated by all the the safety systems and the regulations. And who's going to enter a market like that? There's no future. Well, one did get in, of course.
Is that Bedrock, the one who got in?
Did you say Bedrock?
Is that Bedrock Automation is the one which got in to do those critical safety systems now?
Well, the history was that August Systems was actually the first one with this technology called TMR, the TMR concept. And that's what Triconics was, TMR. So August Systems was first. Triplex was second. They're long since bought up, but Triconics was actually the third company using this TMR technology, this TMR approach, which was safety, but plus availability. It wouldn't shut down on a false trip. And their first two customers, one was named Mr. Exxon, the other was named Mr. Honeywell. When you got that kind of first two customers, it's life is pretty good, but it sure took a lot of money to get those two customers. And just the story goes on after about it was always a venture capital company. It was owned by venture capitalists, and what they do is, here's the money, you make money, we sell it. Okay. However, during those years, Exxon actually thought they were the owners. Honeywell thought they were the owners. And so when it came up to sell Triconics in 94, 95, the venture capitalists just show me the money. Who's the highest bidder? And it wasn't Exxon. It wasn't Honeywell. They did bid, but it was a company called Inventus out there in the UK. So that was a long answer to a short question, but I think it's just so interesting how the technologies intersect, the companies intersect, and the customer make the best decision for them, right? Price,
Gary,
track record, bugs, all that.
it's so much on the other end of the industry than myself. I ran into one sys loop on one project. And that was where the client said, a multinational German company said, we'll go directly to Emerson, go engineer this loop. And they engineered just one loop of the whole plant. We did everything else. They just engineered that one loop. And then 5 years later, we engineered it out of the process. So they didn't have to pay for their maintenance of that safety loop anymore.
I wanted to ask you about TI. I've never used a TI PLC. I know back in the early 90s, 90, 91, 92, we used to hear a lot about them before they were bought by, and I forget who bought them. Maybe it was Group Schneider. I don't know. But in any case.
No, Siemens.
Was it Siemens that bought them?
No.
Yeah.
Yep. So what can you tell us about using those early TI PLCs?
I told you about that machine which I made to microwave blood plasma. And then we had to develop the next generation. Okay, what are we going to use? So I called up all my vendors, and they came and did a dog and pony show. So we had InTouch plus a PLC5, and I looked at the PLC5, and I said, "You got to be kidding me! You want me to use ladder logic? Really? And then Siemens came in and said, "Look, you can use a keyboard, and you can type in, and it's symbolic, and you can do subroutines too, just like you learned in college." And I said, "I'm sold." So that's what I used. And the APT was the software. It was compiled. It was some kind of pseudo basic, but it was object oriented for automation. So once you spend a little bit more money, and we did a later project, there's a Unix based HMI which goes along with it. Which had integrated graphics and integrated object-oriented graphics, really back early on in the early 90s.
That's I never heard of APT before, so that really clears things up.
So I did. I did that. That's where I built the candle company project. The whole thing. Once I got the I/O talking, the whole code took me 90 minutes to write. It's so trivial. Yeah. The way to copy it from 40 different zones on 40 different molding machines with the right tag numbering scheme. Once you learn how to use the software, it was trivial almost to write those simple. Of course, that was simple code for just switching a valve based on temperature.
Sure. No, that's really interesting. And then I saw, can you show up the prop you have? You had a prop with you, which I could talk for hours about this.
The prop.
Tell your story about this.
The pick.
So pick.
After I left the biotech company, when I did the project with the candle company, I have to thank Duncan Walters, who taught me the professional P&ID method, and then he taught me industrial construction. We traveled around New England, and I worked for Polaroid and a variety of companies doing Allen Bradley projects or whatever they had. And he said, never leave without one of these so you can connect up your laptop to their PLC.
Well, that's awesome. Yeah.
So I did projects in fuel cells. One long weekend, the two of us, I think it was Wonderware and PLC 5. We swapped over there was 7 control loops to control the HVAC, basically the fans in each of the heating and drying chambers of the SX70 film line in Norwood, Massachusetts at Polaroid. So Karen Rudder, the engineer there at the time, basically hired us, bless her, for taking her responsibility on us, and the two of us, we went in there on a long weekend, and we ripped out the pneumatic controllers. We put in electrical IPs and tubed them up and tuned the loops and got the whole thing running in 3 days.
Nice.
So we did PLC 5 work. And then we did that wonderful job with the Unix-based Siemens for the candle company. After we did such a good job for them in Cape Cod, at Colonial Candle Cape Cod, I remember sitting in a conference room somewhere on the South Shore with the CEO of Blythe Industries, which I think was a South Shore company, and said, "We're going to build a new candle company, a candle factory in the Midwest. We want your help developing the process, figuring out what we're going to do with the water and the wax. So you guys seem to know what you're doing, moving liquids around." And he said, "Okay, great." So we came up with some designs. We need tanks, level transmitters. We developed the whole process. And we were at the next meeting a couple months later, and the president of this company said, "Well, who's going to buy the tanks?" And I rose my hand and said, "I will." And my boss, who was in the room, he didn't tell me, "What are you doing?" He's basically taught me. He says, "In this business, you do whatever you can to increase your business." And so basically we said, "We'll buy the tanks." So we bought 132 tanks and
Wow.
the IO and all the instruments and valves. And some of the vendors I worked with on that project are still friends of mine today, 30 years later. We built the big candle factory in Chicago. We did learn about union rules. So we worked at night because I was able to take the screwdriver out of my pocket and do loop checks and figure out how to get things to go. Before that, I had to see that wire. Let's remove that and swap it. It was just too slow. So we worked 4 to 2 in the morning doing startup,
Wow.
getting that done.
Because nobody wanted to work that hours, so you kind of had
No,
to
it was
do what you need.
it was a
Yeah.
small company.
Yeah.
My father, who was an engineer, he worked in the aerospace industry in Connecticut. When I graduated college, I said, I can go work for Kodak and IBM and Data General and DEC and Wang. And then my professor in a small company with 15 people. And he said, "Steve, do it. Whatever you can do, go to the smallest company you can find." And every time I jumped to find a new place, I always went to the smallest company I could find.
That's
And then
great philosophy.
after that candle factory, he offered me a piece of the company, and I said, "That's great, but I'd rather find different business partners." Actually, my wife helped me make that decision.
Oh, wow.
That's really good, Steve. Now you know what to do. Go find some different business partners to do it with. And I did. And I've been with that group of fine partners for over 30 years now.
I want to, I'm just looking at the time here. So in our previous episodes, which I know you haven't seen, Stephen, we've talked about inflection points. And I'd like to get your and Gary's thought about the history of automation. Again, we're talking, products that, we talked a lot about today. We talked about the inflection point, late 60s, where the PLC really gets birthed. We talked about the 90s, where we see the early 90s, like the late 70s, where we see networking, Profibus, Modbus, Data Highway. We talked about, the mid 80s to 90s, where the IBM PC comes out and the change that had on the industry. And then Windows 95 just changing the world, right? Because it put it in the hands of everybody. But I'd love to know, and Gary, chime in too, but Steve, tell us about some of your thoughts about the inflection points you've seen in the technology since you've been in this industry.
Well, I see. That was a great segue, those points, right? The next one, I don't know the dates, and I'm sorry I didn't research it with Wikipedia, but another point was virtualization.
Oh, sure.
I had to support multiple machines and multiple clients, but the fact that now I can use VMware and
Yeah.
I can have a machine for this. But of course, it got out of control with Allen Bradley because then you have your revisions, and now you have to have multiple VMs for each of the revs of their Rockwell software. But
I could
that's
never go
different.
back not having a
Yeah.
snapshot. I was
Yeah.
doing something on my show where I was right clicked adding, I was trying to add an IFM IO-Link master into Studio 5000 and it crashed. And this is my lunchtime live show. And it crashed Studio. I'm like, I'll
Yeah.
be back tomorrow. And if I didn't have that snot, so I spent a couple hours that night trying to fix it. I'm like, this is baloney. I'm just going to keep going back to snapshots until I find one that works. And I did. And I'm like, I'll never do anything bare metal anymore. I got to have everything on, my operating system is clean and everything's in a VM.
I guess
That's the way I work. Yeah.
it depends on the system. Okay. I would say a Rockwell system with plant packs and their whole slew from their whole system. Yes, you need that. But of course, they would actually give you the whole VM fully installed
Yeah.
and say, "Here, use this one," because it's so hard to install a damn thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I've actually asked him to come on the show and
But now,
wrote that.
now it's all since now we can virtualize the PLC programming language is on one virtualization machine. Ignition is on another virtual machine. The database is on another virtual machine. Many times we develop with the database local on the workstation in our office.
Yeah.
And then when we bring the system out to the client site, we just move the database over to there, and then we do it on their MS SQL server.
Sure.
And we just use their tools for that. Many times we use their VMware, basically their virtual machine hosting system, to run all of those VMs of the systems which we're installing.
Yeah, and I'll throw out there too. I was talking specifically about the engineering workstation, the guy who's writing the code or designing the HMI. And if anybody wants somebody to twist around to go with the virtualization, that'll be me. It has saved me.
yeah.
I mean, back in the day, before we all were using virtualization, VMware and others, I mean, if something crashed your PC, you lost an evening or a night or a day because you're basically formatting and because you could never figure out the registry. And well, sometimes you get lucky, but most of the time you just get so frustrated. It's like format C, reinstall Windows, and that is just like the frustration. I'll never go back. But what other reflection point? And Gary, I was wondering, we never talked about this. Did you guys ever use virtualization at the Triconics?
Not really. So just the way it developed, and I just go back to the early 90s with NetDDE and DDE, which I think Wonderware had a big part in assisting, helping Windows develop that. Once we had that, the Triconic system, and that was important. It would be safe. You could be standalone, but could also talk to everybody in a safe manner. So once just use Excel. You compile the database with Excel, and you could export that and import that. Those just amazing software tools was just a key driver for Triconics as well as Wonderware. Just that period of developing DD and NetDD, where these systems, actually the applications could talk to each other. That's not the systems. That was another thing, right? That's actually a different topic. Which I'm probably a little versed on as well, but more I was on the software side, and gosh, I said, it's safe because this database, it can't talk to this one unless you push this button and allow it. And those things are amazing, to me. So that's.
How will you reset? Because you did a lot of training. How are you resetting your workstation?
Resetting the workstations. Yeah, very. Just as usually, as the training manager, that was actually number one thing. First, you get them ready, and then class is over. Let's clean the machines. But relatively, we just learned as trainers, okay, let's just put them in the folder and that sort of thing. But just say that just reminds me of it. Like all of our jobs, it's not we walk in and here's the answer. We do a lot of prep. in any of our professions as the engineers, and we're ready for the job. We're ready for this question. But the cleanup and prep for training is certainly part of the job to make that as clean a machine and is ready to learn machine and to build your own projects. And we really encouraged you to bring your projects in and do in the classroom if we could give you some help there. But good question. Yeah, but it reminds me of the days you're going to be ready for that customer, right? No matter what you're offering.
Yeah, and I think to play off something Steven said is with the Rockwell, there's so many different versions and so many different softwares. We were, before we had VM, we were ghosting. I mean, we would get the system precise and we would ghost to it. We had another hard drive in there. We'd ghost the image to the hard drive because inevitably somebody would mess something up and couldn't fix it. And the day would end and we would just ghost it back to when it worked, And so virtual machines with snapshots, of course, so much faster than ghosting. Stephen, other thoughts about inflection points in the history of automation?
So another inflection point was, so it's kind of interesting, Gary, your systems, all right, your Triconics is going to be large gas and oil systems, high energy, high money. I've been working my whole career on smaller energy, smaller money. Someone was asked me the other day about energy efficiency or did tariffs hurt my business and so forth. And I said, you really, in Boston area, we work on technology. So the things we're doing, carbon nanotubes, the special sauce, whatever the special sauce has to be, we make it here in the universities. Microwaves, things which are high dollar per gram or very precise. That's what we do here in New England in our manufacturing. Ever since the Starrett company in Massachusetts was making machine tools. So it's not like we're doing mining. So the tools and the focus of the automation industry here in New England is totally different. I mean, I have been to West Texas, to a giant place where they're adding, basically mixing oil and sand for fracking. Mm-hmm. And I have worked at District Gas down in the unloading terminal in Boston, where they unload and they expand the gas for the unloading of the LNG terminals. So I've done projects in both of those kinds of places, but 90% of our work is biotechnology and high dollar per gram stuff. So it's smaller bio and smaller energy.
The standards for I learned this going to New England, Foxborough, that the folks who worked in the pharmaceutical industry, mm-hmm. Well, they had higher standards than we did, because as Triconics guys, we're safety guys. We don't know all the standards. We're so important, all that sort of thing. That's my personal thing. But when we talk to the pharmaceutical guys, they said, you talk about regulations, you talk about safety standards, and it was amazing. So I agree with everything. But yeah, particularly I hope those regulations stay very rigid as they are, particularly in the medical field.
Yeah, they still are. And when you think about it, so this is CFR Part 11. Early on is like, Intuition says they can do it, or this person. Basically, it says, no, you can't touch the database records without us knowing about it. They're locked. Once you write to the database, you can't touch them. How hard is that to do? All right. So these ideas about this regulation, it's really not that complicated. You just follow, once you've been doing it for a while, of course, there's standard rules, but you don't look at the rule. You don't really look at the rule book, but these are standard things you're going to do in any good, safe process.
I gotta tell the story. I think it was an HBO special in 2013. Maybe it was 2012. And the voting machines were using SQL Server, and they installed the I think I don't know if there was the enterprise manager at that time. They changed the name of the database front end software. And so the hackers, they were just joking around. It's like this is like default password for the SQL Server Enterprise Manager software. I can now open any database and edit any field, and I'm just like, you if a pharmaceutical person would have saw that from somebody from that industry, they probably would have been red faced. Like that is so you know against what would you? I mean, would you agree you shouldn't have the database editing software on a critical system?
No, you shouldn't be doing it.
That's ridiculous.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Those default passwords, all that stuff. It's just but yeah, that's when you're working in a maybe a injection molding, vacuum form molding, or some small company that's making parts and pieces, maybe casting special pieces. You only probably have a couple people in the building who knows PCs, right? Or you may have a clerical person, you may have a product manager, you may have, but in big companies like pharmaceuticals, it's so important security. And really, today, any type of fuel, any type of electricity, any type of pharmaceutical, even food, we got to be careful of our food, making sure that our food is safe. So,
Well, that's
um,
Shawn. That's great. That's a great point. So, you asked another trend. So, I've been building these systems for corporations for 30 something years. So, I was saying the last 10 years, with the virtualization, which we're talking about,
yeah,
many more corporations are saying, okay, you're an engineering company, or you're an integrator, you're a supplier. I want you to give me the code. We're going to run it on our machines, and they will be isolated. So basically, they're on double virtual networks. So there's double hops you need to log in to get them. So I need to get onto their custom VM for the automation system, and then use another VM to log into the PLC. So they're taking control of the IT and the security of their systems, which is great because I don't want to be responsible when everybody's got different systems.
no, and
And I
if you
love
have
when
to
I
work
have
on,
my clients have that internal skill and capabilities. You
Right.
have that communication and say, yes, we'll take this on. This is the data transfer, and this is how we're handling it.
Gary had to leave because he had someplace to go. But Stephen, I wanted to end the show by thanking you for coming on. I truly enjoyed talking about all of this old automation technology that really laid the groundwork for really what you're doing today. And I just found it so interesting, and I would love to have you come back on in the future if there's anything else you'd want to talk about, about the history of automation. But I'm going to pitch it to you for any closing thoughts before we call it a show.
Oh, thank you, John. Um, I always enjoy telling you stories, and just since I was a kid, I loved the factory tours going to Hershey, Pennsylvania when I was a kid, and the little segments on Mr. Rogers showing the factories. And then eventually I got to do it. So that's the best part of my week, is going to visit my clients in their factories and talk to them and walk through and understand what their plans are and their problems. And now I work with my team at SPEC, and we get to solve the problems. We work with toluene and hydrogen. We work in fuel cells and battery recycling and specialty membranes, 3D printing, all sorts of interesting technologies. And it's been that way for 30 years because things change. The money being invested 25 years ago was in biotechnology. We did fermentation plants. And then it switched over where biotechnology then started to grow all the cells in plastic bags. We supported one of those companies early on, which eventually got bought by General Electric, I believe it was. And then we moved on to something else, the battery boom number one, 15 years ago. And now we're in battery boom number two. So in the things always change, but they all stay the same. Manufacturing in the United States and here in New England with my company, SPEC Process Engineering and Construction. Thanks.
Could you share the your website, your URL for anybody who's maybe driving?
Sure. Is www.spec-eng.com.
Excellent.
Find me on LinkedIn, Stephen Landau.
Excellent. Stephen, thank you so much for coming on the show. I totally enjoyed talking to you about the history of automation, and hopefully some of the younger engineers coming out, we've given them more insight into how things developed and those key points in history that really changed things. And thank you for bringing up virtualization. That's near and dear to my heart. I don't know if it's so much to what Gary used because they were kind of a single
No, it's a different, yes.
platform. Yeah. Yeah. But as for engineers, I think that any engineer listening or high-end electrician technician listening, most of them probably know what we're talking about when we're talking about virtualization. So with that, Stephen, thanks again for coming on the show. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Shawn. Bye now.